Today I want to talk to you about controlling your thoughts. If there's one thing that I could teach people that would make the most difference in their lives to the way they feel, the way they deal with their experiences, and the way they interpret what's happening to them in their life, the one thing I could do that would be most important is to teach them how to control their mind. Now, some of you may have heard of this notion before. It's often called mindfulness. It doesn't really matter what we call it. The most important thing is that you're actually doing it for yourself. Most people let their thoughts run rampant through their minds like naughty children. Hi everyone! No one taught me how to control my mind, and until I studied neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, when I was studying hypnosis, I had no idea that it was even possible for me to control my mind or that it was advantageous. You know, we're taught to be very physical in our bodies, we're taught to control our bodies, to control what we wear, to control what we eat, to control our behaviour, but no one ever taught me that it was a good idea to control what I was thinking, or in fact that I could. When I first learned how to control my mind, it made an enormous difference to how I was feeling in my life, and by that stage I was working as a life coach and clinical hypnotherapist, and I had my own practice, so I was teaching other people how to do it. And what I noticed was that within a week or two of teaching them this skill, people would come back to me and they would say, "My God, I feel so much better. I can't believe how easy it was." Often when I'm talking to people about controlling their mind, they kind of look at me with, you know, a frown on their face going, "Oh really? That doesn't sound like something I want to do. It sounds a bit boring, and do I really have to do that?" But I guess because people are coming to me and paying me dollars to help them get over their emotional and psychological dilemmas, that they're more inclined to do what I ask them to do, or try to do what I ask them to do. And they go off and they practice this idea or notion of controlling their mind for a couple of weeks, and they come back much more open and ready to listen to everything else I've got to say, because they realise that they have in fact made great inroads into their own personal suffering. So I want to talk today about how to do it. And once you've watched this webcast, I suggest that you, if possible, go and download a copy of my book on Amazon called Get Back Your Mojo, 11 Ways to Kick Anxiety, Depression and Unhappiness, because in the first couple of chapters of that book I outline in specific detail the things that you can do to control your mind. There's not one way to do it. There are many different strategies that you can use to do it. Not the same thing doesn't work for everybody. So the best thing to do is to look at all the different strategies that you might use that I've outlined in that book, and practice. You know, when you experiment, you always get feedback, so you always get information back. So the best thing that you can do for yourself is don't believe anything I'm telling you. You don't have to trust me. Have a go at using some of these really easy strategies in your life and see if it works for you. If it doesn't, no big deal, you haven't lost anything, but there's a good chance that it will. So let's talk about the mind for a bit. Apparently, so science tells us, we have about 60,000 separate thoughts in a day. And what I say to clients is that 95% of those 60,000 thoughts are crap. You are just thinking shit that is not good for you and has no point. You know, the mind is a very powerful tool, and you know, I went to university and studied and got a degree, and for all through my 20s was very intellectual and very, you know, in my intellectual research-oriented mind. I'd studied psychology at university, so I was all about being rational and analytical and all of that sort of stuff. And that is all well and good. It certainly has a place in our life. We need to be like that sometimes, but not all the time. I think as human beings, our greatest power comes from our feelings and our imagination and what we might call more right-brained aspects of our power and the way our consciousness works. So being rational and analytical can only take you so far. It certainly discounts the notion of having a higher mind, a greater consciousness, or a soul, which is probably why I didn't particularly like psychology when I was studying it, and I didn't end up becoming a psychologist, because in those days that they didn't really go into that humanistic approach too much. It was very much stats and maths and all very sciencey. Psychology's come a long way since then. They are, there's a lot of different psychologies that have emerged over the last 10 or 20 years since I was at university. So if you have 60,000 separate thoughts a day, 95% of them are crap, you can see that there's lots of work to be done there. If your thoughts are not in harmony with what you are trying to achieve in life, then they are leading you in the wrong direction. If you have decided in your life that you want to be peaceful and happy and successful, then your thoughts have to be thoughts of peace and happiness and success, not thoughts of doubt and criticism and fear, which is what most people's thoughts are all about. So I like you to think about the fact that you have two separate minds. You have an ego mind, which is, you could think of as your consciousness, and it's a good idea to kind of think of that as being in your head. It's not. You don't actually think in your brain. Science can't actually tell us where you think. But from a spiritual perspective, I would say we're an aspect of consciousness, we're in energy, and we think in the whole of our energy, or, we bring thoughts in from everywhere all around us. So you have an ego, conscious part of your mind, and then you have this thing that in science we call your unconscious mind. If you were spiritual, you might call that other part of your mind your higher self, your inner self, your soul, divine mind. There are many different names for it, but, we are told that, our conscious mind is only 10% of our thinking mind, and the other 90% of our mind is this part of us that is the unconscious or subconscious mind or soul mind. So you can see that being all rational and analytical and being in your conscious mind, since it's only 10% of your capacity to think and experience anyway, is fairly limited if you're there all the time. And you're totally discounting that other 90% of you. So here you are, you've got 60,000 separate thoughts a day, 95% of them are crap, and you're really only allowing yourself to access your conscious mind without giving any power to your unconscious mind. Now, your unconscious mind is the part of you that dreams. It's where your imagination comes from. It's the source of all of your feelings. It's where you store all of your memories. It's where you learn things. The unconscious mind heals your body. It's programmed to heal your emotional and psychological self as well as your physical self. Your unconscious mind is where most of your habits come from, repetitive habits, because you learn to do things and then somewhere below the level of your awareness you just continue to keep repeating those habits. So the unconscious mind is very malleable. It can learn to do all sorts of new things. And it's a good idea to think of your unconscious mind as sort of a genie. It does exactly what you tell it to, or the hard drive in your computer. So it is programmed to do certain things, and then it just keeps replicating those certain behaviours and thoughts and experiences for you until you reprogram it. Now, some of the programs that are in your unconscious mind, of course, are helpful. They're fantastic. They help you to do the things that you do and live the life that you're living now. But just imagine if you had the power to reprogram your unconscious mind and to delete any programs that were limiting you or not helpful, and to empower yourself in more helpful programs. Wouldn't that be a great thing? Well, that is what being in control of your mind is, because what you need to be aware of is that every thought that you think is programming your unconscious mind. Every time you say something to yourself or to someone else, whether it's a thought inside your mind or whether you're actually speaking it, you're actually communicating with your own unconscious. And you could say to your unconscious, oh no, I can't do that. And your unconscious goes, okay, no shit, Sherlock, I can do that. And before you know it, you've created some experience or feeling or behaviour pattern that stops you from doing that thing that you're talking about. So you've got enormous power to be actually able to change your life when you learn to control your mind. So the first step in learning to control your mind is to begin to observe your thoughts. Now, what most teachers would say is if there is a part of you that actually can observe that thinking, observe those thoughts, then you are not your thoughts. If you can observe them, you can't be them. Now think about that for a minute, just ponder it. So you start to observe your thoughts, and you may notice as you observe those thoughts that some of them, or maybe many of them, are negative thoughts. They're unhelpful thoughts. They're taking you in the wrong direction that you've said you wanted to go. Let's imagine for a moment that you told yourself you wanted to be happy. And you have many, many thoughts that actually make you feel unhappy as you have them. Now, remember, the thought comes first and the feeling follows. It's not the other way around. And many people come to me and I say to them, what were you thinking when you had that feeling? And they say, oh, I don't know. But that doesn't mean to say that they weren't thinking something. It just means that they haven't become aware of what it was they're thinking, or they're not recognizing it. So you have a thought, it produces a chemical response in your body which you interpret as a feeling. So if I'm having negative, fearful thoughts, I'm going to feel fear in my body. And I might interpret that as being anxiety or fear or sadness or whatever that is. So here you are, you're observing your thoughts and you notice that you're thinking a negative thought. Don't beat yourself up, don't feel bad, because you're learning to do something new, right? We never, beat ourselves up when we're learning to do something new. All learning is good. So you notice that you're having this negative thought. At that point, you can say to yourself, stop. Stop. And see it as a new experience, the potential moment for you to practice doing something differently than you've done before, and therefore change yourself in some way. So you tell yourself to stop. See, I like to hold my hand up. Stop. Stop. And you've got many things that you can do from that point on. You can replace the thought with a better feeling thought. So if I were thinking something negative about myself, oh, you're a fat cow, for instance, I could stop myself and go, hang on a minute, I'm remarkable, I'm beautiful, I'm perfect just as I am. Something. Don't think of it just as an affirmation, because affirmations are good, but they don't necessarily tell the whole story and don't completely work, right? Without other things. So, but you can't be thinking a negative thought at the same time that you're thinking a positive one. And if you're having 60,000 thoughts a day and 90% of them are no good or not helpful, there's a lot of room there for you to repeat some positive thoughts to yourself or positive affirmations to yourself. So that's one thing I can do. I can replace the negative thought with a more positive one. Another thing that I might do, the second thing that I might do, is I might distract myself. So I'm focusing on something and it's not doing me any good or taking me in the right direction. I want to take the focus of my attention off that thought. I could sing a song to myself. I could distract myself by going off somewhere in my imagination and imagining a great scenario for myself, something around that thought. I could go and watch something on TV, I could have a bubble bath, I could go for a walk in the sunshine, I could play with my children, I could play with my dog, I could listen to some uplifting music. I mean, there's many things that we as human beings use to distract ourselves from our negative feelings. So distraction is actually a really good tool. Even if you just manage to distract yourself for 5 minutes, that's a great thing. Now, if you're really going through a time of chaos in your life and you're having lots and lots of obsessive negative thoughts, obviously this is going to be more challenging than if you're just someone who's kind of negative in a way. So, you know, at times of grief, breaking up relationships, intense feelings of anxiety, intense depression, it's obviously going to be a bigger challenge, okay? I'm not saying that it's not. But that doesn't mean to say that you can't make some difference. Even if you make just a tiny bit of difference and bring yourself relief for only a few moments, it's worth it. Because all of those few moments of relief over and over and over build and build and build and build and build and build to get you to a point where you're actually feeling better. I mean, what other choice do you have? You can either feel bad or feel good. It's up to you. You know, most of the people who come to me that are feeling some sort of emotional suffering have already tried medication and it didn't work for them. Certainly, if you can take something and it's going to make you feel better and it's not going to harm you, there are no bad side effects to it, go ahead, take it, why not? But for a lot of people that are suffering emotional disorders or just unhappy, medication's not necessarily the answer. So you tell yourself to stop. You can repeat a more positive thought or more positive affirmation, or you can distract yourself with something. Now, there are many, many NLP strategies, neuro-linguistic programming strategies, that we use to actually bypass the normal neural network and to reprogram the mind. Remember that if you've thought a particular thought over and over again, it's like walking a well-worn path in your mind. Every time you think that same thought, you're digging it deeper and deeper and deeper groove. When you stop thinking that habitual thought and you start to think another thought, the neural network of the mind actually rewires itself. Your brain is quite malleable, so it can do that. The neural network of the brain and the mind is not in the brain, remember, the mind is in every cell of your body. The neural network of your mind can actually rewire itself. So by stopping the electrical impulses from jumping from one synapse to another, so these are the synapses in your mind, and the electrical impulse jumps across what is actually fluid between the synapses and the neurons. By stopping the signal from jumping to the same synapse over and over again, that's how the neural network starts to rewire itself. So by not thinking that habitual repetitive thought, you're actually reprogramming your mind. That's how it works. Now, there are many other things that you can do to help support this notion of controlling your mind, changing your mind. You can use hypnosis. I'm a trained hypnotherapist, so I use hypnosis to help people do that all the time. You can use the tapping technique, EFT, which is another good one for helping to reprogram your mind and stop those habitual negative thoughts. And as I said, there are lots of NLP or neuro-linguistic programming strategies that can help you do that. So one strategy that I like to use when I'm having a habitual negative thoughts, because they never go away completely. I mean, we're human, right? So we're always going to have an ego mind, and it is always going to be a mind of fear and doubt. That's part of our humanness, and unfortunately a necessary part of us being on the planet up until now. Because the ego, we had to have the ego mind in order to have that sense of separation from others and from our environment, because in actual fact, without that, we are just all one. We are one. And to have this experience that we decided to have when we came here to Earth, we had to be separate and individuated. So that's what your ego mind does for you. But it's an illusion, it's not real. But we're still living with that illusion at the moment, so we have to deal with it in some way. So one of the strategies that I use when my ego mind arises, say it's a negative thought about myself that comes up, I sing to myself. Que Sera Sera is a great song that I sing to myself. I might sing it out loud, or I might sing it quietly in my mind. Usually it's probably out loud. So say I'm having a negative thought about something, I'm worrying about something that's going to happen in the future, you know, just start singing to myself, Que Sera Sera, whatever will be, will be. The future's not ours to see, Que Sera Sera. It's an old Doris Day song. I'm showing my age by actually singing that, but I've taught that little trick to a lot of people who've come back and told me that it really worked for them too, so, you know, I'm not the only one. So give it a bash, have a go at it, this controlling your mind. Do some reading. You can download my book on Amazon, as I said, Get Back Your Mojo. And I'll put a couple of links underneath this webcast to lead you to some more information. If you think you'd like to book an appointment to come and work with me, remember I'm a life coach, I'm a clinical hypnotherapist, holistic counsellor, and I'm also a psychic empath, and I do empathic energy readings or psychic readings for people. So if you'd like to have a session with me, please send me an email or call me for a chat. Much love and blessings, and thank you for this wonderful opportunity.